I bought this pearl dragon puppet at the Renaissance Fair in New Jersey last year, and I decided that I'm going to customize it to make it into a mossy little forest dragon for my trip to the Ren Fair this year. So here's a look at the entire process from start to finish. So this is the company that makes the puppet originally, and I love it. He's so cute. I just thought it could use a little bit of my own personal style, and the fact that it's white makes it really easy to paint, and so I am going to try some new things. I'm going to do some things that I already know how to do and also make some tests. The wings stand up on their own, but they're not already posable, so that's something I can add. And I'm going to use a mixture of acrylic inks and acrylic paint and some paint mediums to kind of test out what works best for this. So I'm starting out with some dark green acrylic ink. I've had this for a while, been meaning to use it, and I was kind of nervous, but I watered it down a little bit with this pipette, and I'm gonna just kind of test and see what works best, what kind of sticks to it. So we're gonna start off with its sort of fluffy mane that it has. The trim that they used for that is metallic and it's kind of shiny, so I wasn't sure what was going to stick to it. So I started with the watered down ink first and learned pretty quickly that it needed the full, just straight up acrylic ink to get it to stick a little bit better. I also was trying not to get rid of too much of the softness, but when it dried, it did end up a little crispy. But I figured out a better way to hide that later, which you'll see, and it turned out so cool. I can't wait to show you that step. Oh my gosh. I didn't have too much of a plan going in and pretty quickly ended up getting ink on the white part of the dragon while I was working on this step, so I figured let's just lean into it. And it actually smooths onto the white, scaly, iridescent part of the dragon really nicely, so I just made kind of a huge mess. Some of the ink got on there accidentally, some of it I smeared all over it myself, but it looks so cool, and it's still pretty shiny and a little iridescent, which I loved. I didn't want to like muck it down at all, if that makes sense. I wanted to keep the pearlescentness of this dragon, at least somewhat. And then it was late at night and too dark to film, but I got so curious about what it would look like if I painted the whole bottom section of this dragon, and so this is once it's dried. But I ended up using a combination of two different matte acrylic paints mixed with this textile medium. And now on to the moss. I have been looking for ways to create a mossy look, whether it's fabric or faux moss or real moss glued onto things, and I found this yarn that seemed like it might be a good idea to try. And so I crocheted kind of a long chain that goes from one end of the mane to the other. And then I started to sew it onto the dragon before I finished the other side of the project. I basically was winging this. I didn't use any kind of pattern. I just looked at what it looked like and kind of worked around it from there. Now for the other side, it ended up working out really well that I sewed it on because this yarn is super hard to crochet into. I have no idea where the actual holes that you would crochet into are located, but I was able to kind of scoop my hook under the whole sewed down side when I did this. And so I basically, on the second side, crocheted through the metallic strings that were already part of the dragon and went up the whole other side so that it has a chain on one side of the dragon and then the, I guess, first row of crocheted stitches on the other side, if that makes sense. If you're trying to do this yourself, just kind of see how it looks, and you can add more stitches where needed and less stitches if it's not, like if it's too thick. I also kept that same thread that I sewed the first part on with and just kind of sewed down the opposite side as I went along to make sure that it doesn't lift up because it was not actually attached to the dragon. So yeah, sewing and crocheting at the same time as I created this new little mossy section out of crocheted stitches and this super fluffy yarn. By now I could see a little bit more of what I wanted the dragon to look like, and I decided to get a little bit braver with painting the rest of the white fabric. So I went in with some watered down blue acrylic ink, this like super nice blue, and kind of went around with a Q-tip and dabbed both the green watered down acrylic ink and that blue watered down acrylic ink in different spots all across the dragon. I found that these two blended together really nicely, especially when I dipped a Q-tip in just water and kind of smoothed over the places where they overlapped. And I love it because there already are some touches of these bright colors just in the little iridescent shine that this dragon had all over it already, and I wanted to bring them out because I don't know how it's going to catch the light, and I feel like it's going to be so cute. And now that I kind of saw what the moss looked like, it helped to see that. It made it easier to visualize where we were headed, and so I was willing to take a risk with this ink, and I'm really glad that I did because now it has this like shiny watercolor look to it. Ah, so cute. And then I decided that it needed purple. So this one really started to pull it together and make it look a little bit less like a mermaid. And so I loved it. I think this was a really nice combination of colors, and they all kind of blended really nicely together. So it is turning out so cute, and I kind of can't believe it. I highly recommend, if you have an idea for a project and you aren't really sure if it's going to be a mess or not, just kind of going for it, because the longer I worked on this, the happier I was with it. And then I allowed things to get a bit more complicated because I was feeling a lot more confident about this project, and so I decided to make some custom patterned plush pieces to add shape and color and texture to this dragon character. So I used just pieces of paper and a pen to kind of figure out where I wanted the patterns to start, and then adjusted the patterns as I sewed them and stuffed them with the fabric that I was using and saw how they looked. This is something I've been doing since 2010 for my Etsy shop, which started out as Fairweather Friends and is now Fairwick's Forest. And so I have a lot of practice with this, and I've made a lot of videos about the process over the years. But yes, this is something that I've been working to be able to do for a really long time, and I am so excited about how it came out. I wanted to adjust the shape of the nose quite a bit. I wanted to add ears. I wanted to take off the horns and add antlers instead. And I wanted the wings to be longer and posable and also multi-layered and multicolored. The antlers were very skinny and very difficult to flip and turn around, so I actually ended up, this is the second version of the antlers that I made, and I used a variety of tools, including a lollipop and a straw to try and turn them. Use what you have. I used this armature wire in order to make some of the pieces posable, and I also, once I got a wire and everything into the little antler, I realized it was way too tall and ended up chopping the bottom half off of it, which I thought made it feel a lot more balanced, which is good. It's all like kind of testing and seeing what works, experimenting. And then I seam ripped the little horns that came on the dragon off of there and left the hole open because that could be where I would put the antler and also the ear. And I thought he looked a little bit like a fish during this step. But that also allowed me to use one single piece of armature wire that connected both antlers with the dragon's head. That would allow it to feel a little more rooted there instead of just loosely attaching the individual antlers, and that hopefully will make it more posable and give me a little bit more control over the way that they sit. I think it turned out okay, and I can definitely get it to pose in the way that I want it to, which is very helpful. In order to kind of fill up the antlers a little more and keep that wire stuck inside firmly, I stuffed them with these hemostats, which are a very helpful tool for plush making. I am so glad that I finally bought them, and maybe I will get an actual tool for turning small pieces. But the straw's working for me for now, so at least there's that. For the ears, I wanted kind of a cow or deer ear. They're so cute, and it gives it more of a woodland creature feel. And those turned out pretty cute. I ended up using purple on the inside and dark green on the outside. And then I stuck them into the hole where I had the antlers, where the horn used to be, and sewed both the ear and the antler down, making sure that the edge of the fabric was tucked in place properly. And I wasn't sure if this fabric would hold up to stitching well, but it actually did. I've worked with some really thin kind of metallic-y fabrics that are a little bit flimsy, and this one ended up being just fine. I didn't have any problems with the fabric ripping while I was sewing it, which is very lucky, because when you're using found objects to customize and create your work, you don't always have a choice about what it's made out of, and so that was lucky. But it's turning out so cute. I'm just already in love, super smitten with this little thing, even though it's taking a very long time to kind of get it where I want it to. But I wasn't in any rush, and I could just kind of sit and see what it needed next. And I'm so glad that you're along with me for the ride. Going further with the deer inspiration here, I made a little snout. The first one was way too big, but that's okay, because then I made another smaller one. And I was much happier with this shape, but I didn't like the colors and the materials I used as much. So I'm going to show you the process of making the third attempt at the snout, which ended up just exactly what I wanted it to be. So sometimes the only way, for me at least, when I'm making plushies, to know what the best way to do it is to make a couple and to look at them and try them out, like, actually with the real materials. And then you can kind of keep going until you get it right. These pieces that I've been adding are all sewn on my sewing machine off camera, and then I bring them over and see what I can do with them by hand. And this one, I think, is the winner. I'm so happy with it. I ended up using the same fabric as the antlers for the nose, and it is so cute. And the little bit of blue, I thought, blended way better with the face than the brown that I had picked earlier. And so once I had committed to this one, I sewed it right onto the face, just under the eye, and oh my gosh. I feel like this makes it look less like a fish. We're getting away from fish and heading closer to deer, but it's still like an adorable little woodland forest dragon, and I'm here for it. And now that this little guy has a nose and some eyelids, which were very tricky and very tiny, I decided to use some of this dark green minky fabric to add little mossy patches that lined up against the mane, kind of to blend from that fuzzy section down into the area with the scales. And so I just kind of cut out pieces that seemed like they were a good shape and sewed them down. One thing I've noticed about artists who've been really effective at creating faux mossy effects is that they don't just use one texture or one color. It's a blend of textures and colors, a lot like moss is in nature. So that was what I was going for here, using the minky and the yarn and the paint and several different colors, while also combining with the materials that were already there that I had painted. And then came the wings, which I had a pretty clear picture in my head for, which I had going for me because at this point it had been several days. I had to wait overnight for the different inks and paints to dry, and I was starting to run out of steam a little bit. So stick with me because we are in the home stretch, but I eventually did get this done, and I was lucky to get a big push from my kid who checked out what I was working on, said that this dragon was the cutest thing he'd ever seen in his life, and demanded that I make the second wing. So that was very helpful, and I pushed through and made both of them. Sometimes when I'm making a project that has like two symmetrical sides to it, where I have to make two antlers and two ears and two wings, I make the first one and I'm really excited about it, and then I go to make the second one and I just don't want to do it a second time. But I did, and it turned out really cute. I used the original wings as a base for this so that I didn't have to stuff it with anything extra, and they stood up on their own pretty well. But I did use an armature wire so that I could bend them and pose them in the different ways that I wanted to. The original wings did not have that, and so I feel like this added a lot, and that way I can pose it. I did stitch kind of around the armature wire inside of the plush to keep it from moving around in there, because sometimes when I bend and pose the things that I make, they stay there, and I don't want to have to open it up to kind of fix the wire in the future. So it was worth, I think, the little extra bit of time that I spent on that. And then I went with a two-piece design where there's this section underneath the main wing that's a lighter color and has more feathers, and so I sewed that on. I considered adding armature wire to that as well, but it didn't end up needing it. I think you can get the poses that you want, and these just kind of sit underneath and add a little pop of color and some additional feathers. Now for the final touches, I had collected this box full of fantasy woodland inspired beads a while back for some other projects that I worked on, and I had a lot left over, so I thought it would be a really good way to add both some sparkle and some flowers and leaves and things like that, some mushrooms to the back of the dragon. I started with just the mane, and I used 3 strands of embroidery floss because I was hoping that it would be less likely to like break on me than just a single strand of regular old thread. And so I went around and I added what I thought looked nice. And I started with just the mane, and then eventually ended up adding a couple little bits of sparkle to the wings as well. I really hope that watching this gives you some ideas for things that you can do to customize your existing items to make them fit what you need for something, whether it's a costume or a decoration or just something that makes you happy. I was able to use pretty much just supplies that I had around for this, and while it did take a while, I feel like it really reflects the amount of work that I put into it. And now when I go to the Renaissance Fair, I can wear this cute little dragon that looked like this when I got my hands on it originally, and now is something that only I have and that reflects me. If you end up turning something into a woodland forest version of its original self, please tag me on social media at LaurenFairWX. I would absolutely love to see what you end up making, whether it's similar to this or something completely different. See you next time.